Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Bava Metzia. We are up to Perik Chet Mishnah Tet. Today's Mishnah should be Elu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov Chana bat Miriam Sason ben Ryan Yoshua ben Shifra Menuchatam beGan Eden Amen and Lavdi ben Chaim lechaim v'derefua shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa betor Shach Israel and Nachama Merav ben Amin Old Sion Chai ben Dvorah. The Mishnah discusses a final law about renting a house. A maskil bayit lechavero v'nafal. If someone rents a house to another person and it collapses, chayav la'amid lo bayit. The owner must provide a different house for the renter for as long as he was supposed to rent the original house. Since the owner agreed to rent him a house, not a specified house, if the first house he provided fell down, he must provide another one. However, if they agreed that he would rent him this house and it collapsed, the owner does not have to provide another one since they agreed only about this specific house. Nor does he have to rebuild the house that fell down. However, if the renter paid for the entire lease in advance, the owner must give him back the money for the time remaining on the lease. Hayat katan lo yasenu gadol. If the original house was small, he cannot provide him with a large house instead. Literally, he cannot make it large if the renter prefers a small one. Gadol lo yasenu katan. If the original house was large, he cannot provide him with the smallest instead if the renter wants a large one. This is true only if he showed him a house and told him, I will rent you a house like this. However, if he did not specify what kind of house he was renting, he can give him any place that can be called a house, no matter its size. Echad lo yasenu shnaim. If it had one room, the owner cannot provide a house that has two rooms. Shnaim lo yasenu echad. If it had two rooms, he cannot provide him a house that has only one room. In both of these cases, the renter can say he prefers the other type of house. Lo yivchot me'achalonot v'lo yosif alein. The owner can also not give a house with fewer windows, nor a house with more windows if the renter insists on a house with the original number of windows. Ela midat shneim. In all of these cases, the change may not be made unless they both agree to the change. However, if the house is the same in all these ways, but it is painted or decorated differently, it is considered an acceptable replacement, as the Rama writes in Choshen Mishpat, chapter 312, halacha 17. And that is then of Perek Chet Mishnah Tet. Chapter 9 discusses laws that apply when a person rents a field to farm it. This can be done in three ways. Number one, alisut, sharecropping. The renter pays the owner a percentage of the crops, for example, a half or a third, and keeps the rest. As a result, the owner does not receive a set amount for rent. The amount he receives depends on how much the field produces. Number two, chachirut, tenant farming. The renter pays the owner a set amount of produce from the field's crops, for example, 10 cores of wheat, a large unit of volume, and keeps the rest. He must pay this amount regardless of how much the field produces. If the field does not produce 10 cores of wheat, the renter will have to buy wheat from the market to pay the owner. And three, schirut, leasing. The renter pays the owner a fixed amount of money, regardless of how much the field produces. As a rule, tenant farming and leasing have the same laws. While some laws discussed in this chapter apply to all rentals, others apply to only one or two types. We begin with Perek Tet Mishnah Aleph. A field can be rented either for a percentage of its crops or for a fixed payment. Whatever the type of rental, before the rental begins, the owner and renter can set any terms they wish. The Mishnah discusses how certain terms are decided if nothing is specified when the rental is arranged. If someone rents a field from his friend and they do not specify how the crops are to be harvested, if they're in a place where farmers are accustomed to harvest the crops by cutting them, he must cut them. Where they are accustomed to harvest the crops by uprooting them, he must uproot them. Grain can be harvested in either of two ways. It can be cut with a sickle or a similar tool, or the whole plant can be uprooted from the ground. Each method has advantages and disadvantages. For example, cutting the grain is easier, while uprooting it leaves the ground cleaner. If the renter and owner disagree about which method to use, the renter must follow the local custom. Similarly, in a place where it is customary to plow the field after the harvest in order to destroy the weeds, the renter must plow the field. In general, everything that was not specified between the renter and owner must be done according to local custom. The Mishnah turns to a sharecropper. It teaches that he shares more than just the crop with the field's owner. Just as a sharecropper and the owner share the grain, so they share the straw and the stubble, the inedible parts of a stalk of grain. A stalk of grain consists of three parts: the kernel, which is eaten, the straw, which is cut with the grain and used for animal feed, and the stubble, which is usually left in the ground when the grain is cut and was used as fuel for fire. A sharecropper must give the owner a percentage of the straw and stubble, just as he gives him a percentage of the edible kernels. כשם שחולקין ביין, כך חולקין בזמורות ובקנים. Similarly, if a sharecropper rents a vineyard, just as he and the owner share the wine produced by the vineyard's grapes, so they share the branches that are trimmed from the grapevines, and at the end of the season they share the poles that supported the vines as they grew. Ushneim misapkin et kanim. They share these poles because they both provide the poles, meaning they both share the cost of setting up the poles at the beginning of the season. Therefore, they share the poles after the grapes are harvested. A sharecropper is responsible for working the field and protecting it. All of the tasks, such as setting up poles to support the grapevines, are shared by the sharecropper and the owner. In contrast, a farmer who pays a fixed rent must do all the work in the field on his own. The Mishnah refers to a place that has no specific custom about how these things are shared. Otherwise, they follow the local custom as the Mishnah taught earlier. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.